Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga and overcoming the great fear. So there's a passage in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 40, that goes along the lines of something like, even a little practice of this dharma, this religious rite, will help you to overcome the great fear. And this passage from the Bhagavad Gita was reportedly stated by Babaji, Mahavadar Babaji, who was the teacher of Lahiri Mahashai, Lahiri Baba, when Lahiri Baba received his Kriya initiation. And by stating this passage, Mahavadar Babaji was basically saying, in effect, that Kriya Yoga will help the disciple, the chela, to overcome this great fear. Now, what is the great fear? There have been some Kriya Yoga teachers that have talked about the great fear as the repeated cycle of birth and death, in particular saying the colossal sufferings related to the repeated cycle of birth and death. So the idea being that if one has desire, that one will have karmic seeds which will compel one to reincarnate again and again and to go through these cycles of suffering until the desires are worked out and one is free and one experiences moksha, liberation. Others have interpreted this Gita passage to the idea about the great fear, mahato bhayat, to be the fear of death, so one's fear of mortality. And so within the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna having this discourse with the disciple Arjuna and saying basically, by practicing this yoga dharma, this yogic rite, you will overcome this great fear. And in particular, and in the Bhagavad Gita, as Arjuna is wrestling with his inner demons, right, the evil Kaurava brothers, his inner makeup and his inner challenges, practicing this yoga helps one to overcome. And so in a way that is like talking about the yoga methodology, right, helping to deal with internal challenges. And by having a particular method, a particular practice, one is empowered in one's inner spiritual development, helping to resolve internal issues. So while in general humans do fear mortality, and in certain religious circles or spiritual traditions, people are they don't want to suffer the idea about recurring cycles, these rebirths where one will have to work out one's desires, go through some kind of suffering, is something that people don't want, right? And so this really speaks to an internal challenges that we all experience, right? We have unresolved issues inside. And so the great fear is thought of, fear of death, fear of reincarnation, having to go through more suffering, and so on and so on. But in actual fact, that is only scratching the surface. But the essence of the great fear is fear of separation. Because intuitively we know that we are connected to something larger, but in our everyday waking consciousness, the personality, if you will, we don't have that experience of connection. We have a kind of siloed experience from reality. We are usually in our own thoughts, we're in our own bodies for sure, and although we might try to have connections with others or connections in a spiritual way, sometimes we're stopped by sort of the barrier of the mind, the barrier of the perception. And so this fear is about being isolated, of not being able to connect to the totality, of not being able to connect to the divine, of not understanding and being able to act out one's spiritual purpose, to feel that there's a reason for being, if you will, right? This great fear is fear of separation. Death is part of that, if you will, because the idea of the unknown, the body passing away and not knowing, the idea about annihilation is a further separation, if you will, from the totality, because that is naturally what we are. We are connected to a totality. So in yoga is really great because, especially Kriya Yoga, because it helps to bring you inside this internalization, what we call pratyahara in yoga. And that, by doing that, we're aware that we are more than just our mind and our bodies, right? So we get an experience that we have another aspect of ourselves that is much larger. And so that aspect of ourselves, some have called the Atma, the soul, right? The individualized awareness of the spirit, right? And the idea that the spirit having this totality, this unity that we want to rejoin. Our fear is being separated from that and not having the ability to have a connection, right? Feeling lost, not having a purpose, not feeling loved, not being able to love others. This sort of ending, if you will. We want this continuity of consciousness. We want a unity. We want joy. We want peace. We want bliss. All of those things. So yoga is a methodology to help us discover internally what some of those aspects of ourselves are, right? That we experience this sort of deeper awareness, right? That we are more than our present limitations, more than our thoughts, more than our mind, more than our bodies. And that is a very laudable goal in yoga. But the challenge in Kriya Yoga and other yogic paths is that the idea of this sort of colossal sufferings of recurring birth and death. This is a religious idea that has crept into, yogic practices. And what it does effectively is it helps to fixate one on trying to escape a cycle of births and deaths, right? How can I escape this suffering? How can I, this world is not good enough. I feel separated. I don't feel connected. I need to do something to get out of here, right? And so this sort of spiritual escapism has crept into yoga and crept into Kriya Yoga in particular, especially in some Kriya Yoga schools. And so this sort of, almost becomes a denial of life. The idea that the world is an illusion, that the world is suffering and we need to escape it. But that's not the essence of our separation. The essence of our separation is that we haven't connected within and we haven't resolved some internalized patterns that limit our expansion or growth. And so this is why Kriya Yoga can be very effective for getting into an internalized state, into this pratyahara, right? Now, once you get in there, you're not trying to escape your karma and to escape the cycle of birth and death. What you're trying to do is to become aware of what you are more in the totality, right? So we have these various layers of patterns within that have been basically unresolved. One could call those karmic seeds samskaras, but that's a really simplistic way of looking at it. Really what it is internal energetic patterns that haven't been resolved. So those are within us, right? It's an aspect of our personality. It governs the way that we act. It's, in a way, sets a pattern for us to use our energy. And until we resolve those patterns, our energy will flow in the most efficient way, which is along the lines of those patterns. So what do we want to do? We want to get internal and we want to begin resolving that, right? So by resolving that, Kriya Yoga practices like the Kriya Yoga pranayama are very effective for bringing you within, getting you into an internalized state so you can start to experience some of those patterns. So that you can intuit aspects of yourself that are deeper than just your personality, right? What one may call the soul. But there's much more than that, right? One needs a methodology to help to process those inner patterns. So Om Japa in the chakras, right, is something that we do in Kriya Yoga, and it helps to do some of that. And that's why at Modern Kriya, our website modernkriya.com, we also bring in Taoist internal alchemy because it is a very effective practice for helping to resolve internal patterns. So you want an internal perception, if you will. You want to go inside beyond the apparent limitations of your body, mind, etc., and start to experience your inner energetic vistas. And when you do, you encounter some of these patterns. So one of the very effective means for helping to resolve internal patterns of limitation, right, is the inner smile. The inner smile is a foundational Taoist internal alchemy practice where you're tuning into what you feel inside and smiling into it, meaning that you accept it fully for what it is and you give consent for it to change, right? It's a very simple process, just feeling, smiling, accepting, and allowing it to be what it needs to be. What ends up happening is that there is an internal alchemical process of unfolding. That inner energy unfolds, it resolves, if you will, and it integrates into the greater whole. So in a way, you could think of that pattern as an aspect of yourself, right? And by engaging it with an inner smile and acceptance, it resolves into the totality of you. So that aspect that is separated starts to go through a process of integration, right? It gets integrated into the greater whole of you. That's the basic spiritual process that unfolds in all traditions, and people have a variety of techniques for approaching it. But that's the essence of what needs to happen. So we want to get internal, right? So Kriya Yoga is a very effective means for getting internal. But once we're there, we want to open up our inner space and allow things to breathe, allow things to resolve, right? So the inner smile is a really great way to do it. It's so simple. You hardly need anything at all. And there's, I have a variety of videos about the inner smile, and it's very simple. So check out those videos. But that's the essence of what you want to do in unfolding. And from the dissolution of the sense of separation, one experiences a sense of harmony and unification. And through that harmony and unification, there is a dissolution of this fear, right? This fear of having to run away from aspects of yourself that you find negative or reactive, right? I don't like that. I want to get away from that. I don't want to be like this. It's very challenging to have aspects of your personality that are reactive, that don't feel harmonious, and increase your sense of separation, right? It's the human condition, if you will, right? But by applying these spiritual technologies, you can start to get inner resolution, which helps to dissolve the separateness, right? So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.